Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 336 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on how can being a student ambassador benefit psychology students. And it is Sunday the 20th of July 2025 as I record this. So today's podcast episode came out of me basically finishing my outreach work at my university. I've only got the year 10 summer school left, which should be a brilliant time, and me and the other people working are so excited. And then I might be doing a few teaching positions at the university and just like delivering sessions and like content for different outreach programs. But then I'm basically done though. The majority of my outreach time has sadly come to an end. Plus this week, between dissertation, applying for jobs, all my other projects, and basically going out for 2 days or 3 days because I've been really busy, I've not had time or the brain power to sit down, think of a podcast episode to write up and record for you. So this is sort of just going to be it's definitely going to be a longer podcast episode, and it's just me talking to the mic. But it's really interesting, it's really valuable. So the way how it's like going to work is that in the content part of today's episode, I'm going to talk to you about the benefits, some examples, and how being a student ambassador does that for you. And then how does this apply and how does it help aspiring and qualified psychologists? So really useful work. And all universities, at least in the UK, have this Outreach Widening Participation program, and they need student ambassadors as part of that. So this is going to be a really useful, really valuable, and just fun podcast episode. So you've got that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and the first one is, TikTok science is making you overconfident. Presenting complex material clearly is a key part of good science communication, a way for the general public who may lack the high-level knowledge of experts to understand and engage with important or just interesting scientific information. With TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube and other platforms, scientists and science communicators have a ready-made audience with whom to share their knowledge. Simplifying scientific materials too much in order to fit short-form video content, however, may have unintended consequences, at least according to a new study in Frontiers Psychology, led by University of Cologne's Sarah Saderman. Her team looks at short, entertaining online science videos, finding that the most easily understood video summaries can produce the easiest effect. A common bias where people are more likely to trust the information that's easier to understand, as well as overestimate their understanding of the study. Okay, now this is very interesting to me because if you don't know already, then I do have a YouTube account and I post the podcast on it every Monday at 5 a.m. British summertime. Plus, every single day on YouTube, I do release a YouTube short. So I do understand this. And what I tend to do is I tend to take clips from the podcast episodes and then I tend to read them out in the short form of the video content. And it's really useful. It's definitely quite easy for me to do. But this is something that I have to manage. I want to provide good information, but I want to make sure I don't oversimplify it too much, because I always want it to be true. I never want it to be misrepresented. So I do understand this very easily as a creator point of view, because you want it to be engaging, you want it to be short, you want it to be able to be like a YouTube short in like Maya content, but you don't want it to be factually inaccurate because you've oversimplified it too much. So as a creator, this is a fine balancing act, and I definitely put a lot of thought into this, but there could be others out there who don't. So that's something that we've all got to think about as a science communication community. But presenting complex ideas is a key part of good science communication. Definitely. And this is definitely an issue that I think we are really facing in society because certain figures in public life, they've advocated that science isn't true, they know best, and we should ignore the science, but we know how dangerous that is. And the best way to combat this is to show people that science is engaging, interesting, and really useful, and it helps them in their lives. So the ability to present complex ideas in an easy to understand way is really important, and it's something that we should all be focusing more on. But then the easiness effect, I think I've fallen for this myself a few times, which is where I know a bit about the topic, and there are times where I thought, oh yeah, I know way more than I actually do though. Thankfully, I've not done that for years, but when I was younger, I definitely did it. So, lots of good ideas in this article, and things that we've just got to think about and be mindful of. So, the second one is knowing how to say no may elicit a more genuine yes. There are times when we agree to do something we'd much rather not do. Either we feel obliged or fear the ramifications, accepting a social invitation or helping with a project at work, for example. And there are times when we're on the other side of this exchange, making a request and hoping not just for an agreement, but for a sincere and enthusiastic yes. One possible route to that kind of genuine agreement, suggests Rachel Schuller and colleagues in Scientific Reports, is to make refusal easier. Their new study indicates when often people are clear, socially acceptable script to decline that may help counteract the norms of politeness that often lead to reluctant compliance. Though there are still questions about whether or not feeling freer to say no can actually change someone's willingness to decline a request. Okay, so my take on this article is definitely going to be informed by my personal experiences. So I'm I'm going to take the spirit of the article, but my feedback and my thoughts and feelings can be based on what I've experienced. So first of all, there's one thing as a friend and a person, and one as a rape survivor. So as a rape survivor, one of the things that you learn in trauma recovery is boundaries and saying yes or no and maybe. So I remember in this exercise book though that I did, which I flat out love. It's by Erica Sherman, and one of the exercises that she did was it was something along the lines of practice saying yes enthusiastically out loud, so you know how an authentic yes feels. Then say a maybe, and then say a no, just so you can sort of get in a tune with your body and how these things make you feel. So when you do say yes, you're able to see how you feel, and then you'll be able to connect the word yes to your feelings. So if you say yes, then you'll be able to tell if it's enthusiastic or whether you feel pressured to do it. And if you say yes, but you're not enthusiastic, or it's not a genuine yes, then you know to not necessarily change your mind, but take a step back and go, right, why am I feeling this way? And then if it's a like red flag, if it's a safety issue, or if it's something that you genuinely don't want to do, that's when it's so okay to change your mind. Because as a vape saliva, and to be honest, as anyone, and this goes for you, me, everyone who's listening to this, whether you've got a trauma background or not, what happens is that you are the most important person to you. You are in charge of your safety. So by setting boundaries, by giving yourself the empowerment and being able to make informed choices about whether you want to say yes or no to something is really powerful. It's really helpful and it makes you feel really good. Good though, even if there are social consequences. So that's something I want to think about as a vape saliva. So saying no is really healthy, it's really beneficial. Equally, as a friend, I've definitely said yes to some stuff which I shouldn't have. I really shouldn't have. Whether this was helping, whether I was doing this particular thing for a friend or something else. And then I've changed my mind because it harms my mental health, it made me feel bad, I didn't feel comfortable doing it, etc. And then, I've communicated those feelings and I felt so much better afterwards, even if the social consequences were me getting into arguments with friends, etc. So, so I know this isn't quite the spirit of the article, but I would just say be empowered. It's okay to say no. In fact, it's really healthy to say no at times. But at the end of the day, you've got to do what's best for you. And that's where I'm going to leave it there. So the last one is, happiness comes from within, or society, or both. Whether happiness comes from within or is shaped more by our circumstances remains an ongoing debate. In recent years, researchers and policymakers have leaned towards a bi-directional route, suggesting a blend of individual and societal factors is key to achieving life satisfaction in areas like work and romance. However, according to Beck and colleagues' recent publication in Natural Human Behavior, even an approach which seemingly covers all options isn't enough to fully capture what influences happiness. Instead, they argue there is no one-size-fits-all answer, and that in fact, the factors that both drive happiness, whether they are external, internal, or both, or neither, are acutely individual. Oh wow, so this is a complex topic just to cover in a psychology news section. But I think that I definitely agree with both sides because all human behavior is a combination of individual and external factors because you can feel really happy, but if you're living in a bad housing situation, if if you're being abused at work, if you've got a terrible relationship, but all of those are external factors, and it doesn't matter how positively you look at your life. It doesn't matter how many self-care techniques you would do. They will all take their toll in the end. So of course, you've got to keep doing your self-care techniques. You've got to do what makes you happy, and you've got to try and be positive. Practice the gratitude, amongst all the other techniques that I've spoken before on the podcast and in my books. But living in a bad situation is still really bad, and it does harm your mental health. I know that from experience. So it's just something to think about. And what impacts your happiness really is internal and external, in my opinion. But equally, it would make sense that there is a no one size fits all approach because different people can be living in the same situations but have completely different reactions to it. And yes, that is largely down to internal factors like their cognitive style, their personality, and other factors. But it would suggest that there is just no one size fits all, and this is a topic that's way too complex and way too big for me to cover in a psychology news section. So I hope you enjoy the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. So this week has been so much fun. And it's definitely been quite insanely busy for a whole bunch of different factors I didn't realise was actually going to pop up. So this week, because I've not had a summer call or any outreach work, I've been really busy and I've been setting up a whole bunch of different things. Mainly I've been focusing on my dissertation, so that's come along really well. I had a meeting with my supervisor, probably for the last time ever, because she might be leaving today actually, because her contract might not be renewed. But that's more just university level factors that I'm not going to talk about publicly on the podcast. But it's coming along. I don't. Well, as my supervisor said, she doesn't think I need her anymore anyway, because she's got me at a really good position, and I'm really self-sufficient. So I've been able to do that. I've been applying for more jobs. Now, applying for jobs is so boring. But what's amazing is just how quickly some jobs disappear. Like, there was a clinical associate psychologist job that popped up on Wednesday. I was so excited. This is the job that I want. Because by the end of it, you're basically between an assistant psychologist and a fully qualified clinical psychologist. That means that being a clinical associate psychologist, is really powerful and it looks really good on your CV and any sort of job applications in the future. So I saw it on the Wednesday, but I was so busy on the Wednesday. I was applying for research assistant jobs. I was at a research conference. I was having my supervisor meeting, and I was trying to do some stuff for myself. It didn't work. It really didn't work because I was so busy applying for jobs. But then when I got to do it on a Thursday night, I clicked on the job. I'd only checked this job a few hours ago, and the job was closed. It had been up for one day and it had closed early. So many people who had applied for it. Now, these days, I'm very quick at when I see a job, I do try to apply for it as soon as possible. So I know these jobs close really quickly because it's mental health. All the different psychology graduates are trying to apply for these jobs. Yeah, so it's just annoying when that happens because I was not trying to be slow. I was trying to be balanced because on the Thursday, yes, I could have applied for this job Thursday morning and I would have been able to. But I wanted to focus on myself, what would make me happy, and I had other stuff to do on my to-do list. So clearly, that didn't really matter. So, no, it's frustrating. This is just part of the job market and part of the job search. And the reason why I'm telling you this isn't to be disheartening or depressing. I'm telling you this just to know that if you're feeling this, then you aren't alone. This is a normal feeling, and you've just got to balance doing the job hunt, how stressful it is, and looking after yourself. So do nicer things. Prioritize yourself from a time at a time. There's just something like that to think about. And then on Friday, I went up to London, and because I wanted to go to the British Museum because they had an ancient India exhibition, and I've not been to the British Museum for about 4 years. 4 years though since their Peru expedition, and that was really good, really interesting, because it was about the art and the culture of Hinduism, Jainism, I hope I pronounced that right, and Buddhism. And that is just really cool. I did enjoy that a lot. And then I did a whole bunch of other stuff in London. So I basically decided to give myself the day off, which was lovely. I do not give myself time off very much, to be honest, which is something I've got to work on. So, as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So, you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment on the channels at connorwhiteley.net/podcast, And you can always tweet me on Twitter at Sci-Fi Wiley. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And always feel free to send pictures of where you're listening from. I always love to see where all of you are from all over the world. And today's episode has been sponsored by Careers in Psychology, a guide to careers in clinical psychology, forensic psychology, business psychology, and more. So this is a brilliant sponsor for today's episode because the reason why I'm talking about student ambassador work is because it gives you lots of skills, lots of work experience, and lots of different experiences that you can talk about in interviews, job applications, and a whole bunch of other facets of the job hunt after your master's or after your undergrad. So it's really important, really valuable, and that's what today's episode focuses on. But careers in psychology focuses on what can you actually do with a psychology degree. For example, we do touch on like social work, but we also talk about forensic psychology, business psychology, being an academic, being an experimental psychologist, and so many more absolutely brilliant facets, including the 5 different types of like therapists, because being a clinical psychologist isn't the only way to be a therapist. So there's so many brilliant examples of where a psychology degree can take you. So it's brilliant, it's a lot of fun, it's really in depth, and this is really popular. So I highly recommend it. So that is Careers in Psychology, available from all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback and hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore, or local library if you request it. And if you want the AI generated audiobook, then now you can from selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Kobo, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble, and selected library systems like Overdrive, Biblioteca, and Bacon Taylor. So whilst buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And as always, a massive thank you to my patrons because your support shows that you like the show and you are wanting to continue. So if you want to become a patron of the show and get access to tons of great rewards, including over 60 to 70 exclusive blog posts, which will be made into podcast episodes for weeks, months, or even years, then please head on over to patreon.com/the Psychology Wire podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, then now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So that's enough of the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about how can student ambassador work benefit psychology students. So this is a great podcast episode, so let's dive into it. So the layout of like today's episode is that I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of like different benefits. I'm going to talk about the benefits themselves, why they're important from an employment perspective, some examples of how outreach work and widening participation work has helped me gain these skills, and then we'll apply these to psychology students specifically. But first of all, I just want to mention what is outreach work and what is widening participation work. So, what my personal definition, which is a much nicer and less formal definition than given by outreach themselves. So, what it is that student and ambassadors they work with children and young people aged between 12 up to 18 years old, and sometimes adults because we also work in further education at colleges and a few other places. And we work with them to show that university is possible regardless of your background, your socio-economic status, whether you're disadvantaged because you're in receipt of like free school meals and a whole bunch of like different other facets. If you want to go to university, then you can. And typically, student ambassadors work with schools that have a lower than national average of students that go on to university. So that's what our partner schools do. And I flat out love it. So let's dive into some of the benefits. So, first of all, and I know this is a really mundane one, but it gives you work egg experience. And we all know that work egg experience, any sort of like egg experience, is really valued by employers. Because as long as you have some sort of like work egg experience, then it's super valuable. And you're much more likely to be employed compared to if you've never worked a day in your life. And a lot of this is because of the different skills and the different transferable skills that you pick up. And I'm going to talk about that in the other sections of today's podcast episode. But work experience is super valuable. So I've been working outreach for 6 years now, which I still think is actually quite amazing. And I flat out loved every minute of it. Of course, there were challenges. What job doesn't have challenges? And there were some days I'm like, wow, that was a hard day. But outreach is super supportive. My other ambassadors, they're really supportive. And to be honest, the really funny thing is that I remember in my grandma's eulogy what she said about grandchildren. And I think there were parallels here, to be honest. So she said the great thing about grandchildren is that you can give them back at the end of the day. And to be honest, I feel the exact same way about school students at times, though. Some students are amazing, they're wonderful, and you absolutely love working with them because they're passionate, they're engaged. Other students, you are very happy that you don't have to see. Thankfully, that is so rare, and the 99% of students are absolutely brilliant. But there are some groups you're just like, wow, I'm really glad I don't have to see them again. But work experience is really valuable, mainly because of the other benefits that I'm going to talk about in a moment. We quickly apply this to like psychology students, that the reason why work experience is important for psychology students is we all know how competitive the job market is when it comes to psychology. So we all know that after you've done your studying, once you've got your master's, your undergrad, or whatever qualification that you're currently on, after that, you need to start getting mental health experience. So the very fact that you've got some work experience from a student ambassador work is already going to make it a little bit easier. Of course, as I spoke about in last week's podcast episode, it's still going to be so difficult to be able to get a mental health related job, let alone an assistant psychologist job. But if you've got some experience, if you've got some work experience at all, then that opens the door slightly. And that really makes a massive difference compared to other psychology students who have never worked a day in their life. So that's one way how outreach work can be seriously beneficial. It's fun and you get to do lots of different things. So personally, this is my main benefit of outreach work. And this is why I love being a student ambassador. Because it is so much fun. You get to do so many different amazing things that you would never get to do normally. So, as all of you know, I'm a psychology student. Chances are you are too if you're listening to this podcast episode. So normally I would never have to get involved in that conservation work, woodland walks, teaching students about liquid nitrogen, even dipping rubber into liquid nitrogen. Or one of my favourite was you drop a cucumber that's still in the plastic wrapping into a tub of like liquid nitrogen, and it pops because the water makes it expand. That was amazing fun. I loved that day. Plus, you also don't get in those like assembly talks, interacting with like students, doing reading interventions. one of my favourite things was the forensic science day I did last year. That was amazing fun because I got to do fingerprinting, I got to do blood tests, I even got to get dressed up in the little white crime scene tech suits, and then what we did was we helped assess a crime scene. So that was amazing fun. But if I wasn't a student ambassador, I wouldn't be able to do any of that, which I think is a massive shame because this work is just amazing. I love it. And I've been able to give speeches, presentations. I've also been able to develop my own psychology content. So if I was just a psychology student, I wouldn't be able to do any of that. So why is that important to aspiring psychologists? How could that chance to do lots of different things impact my employability in the future? To be honest, well, having fun is a really important life form, and I think that it's definitely made my university experience a lot richer, a lot thicker, and enjoyable. And because I've done so many different things, with outreach, there are a few benefits. So, firstly, it gives me a lot more experiences to draw on in interviews, and I've done that quite a few times. So, interviews, cover letters, personal statements have all really benefited by me doing lots of different things there, because each of these different situations teaches you different skills, and you've got to handle these situations differently. So that can be really helpful in job applications. Also, the ability just to have fun, it helps protect you against burnout, fatigue, mental exhaustion, especially if you've got a really intensity degree. So not a lot of people understand this when I talk about it, but to be honest, outreach is my escape. Outreach is so much fun, and that's why I keep doing it time and time again, because it just gives me a break when my degree is really busy. So I really do recommend it for that. So protective factor against mental exhaustion and fatigue, and it gives you lots of different things to talk about on job applications. Meet new people and make new friends. So this is definitely the second major benefit of being a student ambassador and doing outreach work. Because, to be honest, my whole reason why I do outreach is to make friends, to meet new people and do lots of different things. I've met so many different people through outreach. I've met different ambassadors, different members of our staff, and all of them do completely different things to me. But I've got really good relationships, really good connections, like some ambassadors who I was doing a summer call with, which is a 4 week period of doing outreach work every single day for 4 weeks. We're doing a barbecue on the 1st of August because we're friends, we want to hang out, we want to be social with each other. Some of them I'm really good at friends up with now. All of them I have really good conversations with those. So we talk about our lives, we're social, and all of them I never would have met if I had only been a psychology student, because none of them study psychology, which I think is just a really good reminder that university is about meeting new people. And if you're not as social as me, I'm an introvert, I do have a bit of social anxiety, especially when my mental health is really bad up because of my rape. But outreach gave me a structured, calm, and relaxed way to meet the new people, because yes, we're there to do a job. Yes, we're there to support students and aspire them and show them that university is possible, but the social side was really beneficial too. And focusing on employability, the ability to meet new people, work with people that you never met before, it's really valued by employers, and constantly on person specifications of job applications, I see that is a requirement, which actually leads me on to my next one, which is communication teamwork, friendliness, and rapport. So being a student ambassador really helps you with all of them because if we can continue like in the current lane, so when you meet new people and to make new friends, you will need to communicate clearly. You will need to work as a team. You will need to be friendly, and you need to be able to quickly build a rapport with your other ambassadors and the staff members, just so you can ensure that the day runs smoothly. You can build relationships with your students, just so they're having a nice time and that they feel comfortable around you, so they can ask questions about university life and whatever they want to be honest. So that's really important. And when I started Outreach like 6 years ago, I was not good at communication. I wasn't really good at teamwork. I was definitely friendly, and my rapport building skills have also dramatically improved over the past 6 years. And largely that just comes down to me practicing talking to other ambassadors, me practicing talking to a whole bunch of different students. All of that just comes through practice. And if I was only a psychology student, and if I didn't do student ambassador work, I definitely wouldn't be that good at communication. I would not be good at teamwork because I don't really interact with many people on my course. And that's definitely a me thing. And I've just not been able to strike up that many great conversations or that many great connections with psychology students. There's been a few brilliant exceptions, and I flat out love those people. But for me, interacting with psychology students is quite difficult. So outreach has given me another great way to meet new people and practice communication, teamwork, and other skills. So very quickly, just like wrap up this point in employability. So all of these key skills that you learn by being a student ambassador is really important in terms like in employability because all in employers want you to be a like good communicator, a good team worker, friendly and rapport. Because when it comes to a mental health work, we need to be friendly and we need to quickly be able to build rapport with our future clients and anyone who we're supporting with their mental health. So just something to think about. Interact with people from different cultures. So this is a quick point that I want to make based on a University College London job application that I applied for recently. Because part of the person specification was that they wanted you to be able to interact with people from different cultures. So this was an important one and one that I found really easy because a lot of the schools that we work with, because they're from disadvantaged poor areas, the majority of the students who we work and we interact with come from ethnic minorities. And also a lot of the different ambassadors, because at university you get to meet people from different cultures, different races, different countries, and people with different backgrounds and experiences as you. You really do get a good listen to other people, talk about their culture, why they believe or why they act the way that they do, and sometimes you do need to have like those conversations because sometimes I think that ambassadors have acted in ways how I wouldn't act, and or they wouldn't approach a like situation not how I would have. But if you listen to them, then it makes complete sense. Given the life situation, their past, their culture, and their personal experiences. So it teaches you those skills like empathy, listening, and other important skills when it comes to cultural intelligence. So student ambassador work is really important. And this is something else that you can talk about in job applications when it comes to applying for mental health roles. Work with a wide range of populations. As aspiring psychologists, we know that we really need to work with a wide range of different clinical populations. For example, we need to work with children and younger people, working aged adults, people with learning difficulties, and older adults. So those are the main four clinical populations that you tend to work in a clinical psychology. But there are also other populations too, and student ambassador work really helps you with that because my university recently got awarded the Sanctuary Award, which means that they really see a positive and a helpful of asylum seekers. So last year, I worked with some asylum seekers who came to the university because they really wanted to come here, they wanted to do their degrees, and they wanted to work. Now, asylum seekers are some of the loveliest people you will ever meet because they're very understanding, caring, and they're really nice though, and they have such a drive to want to study here, work, and pay a tax. So those are some of the opportunities that you might be able to do as a student ambassador. Also, I've managed to work with children and younger people, obviously, but I've also been able to work with students with autism, ADHD, other neurodevelopmental conditions, and even some learning difficulties. So that's all really helpful experience for me. As well as I've also been able to work with working age adults in the higher education colleges where people are on access courses, which helps them be able to go on to university. Therefore, outreach work is really valuable, really important, and it gives you access to a wide range of different populations, which you wouldn't be able to do if you were only a psychology student, or you would have to do lots of unpaid work experience, which, as I talk about in a moment, is not ideal. And I had a long rant about this in last week's podcast episode. So this is one of the reasons why student ambassador work is really useful and valuable. Get involved in research and data input. Another aspect of being an aspiring psychologist is that your research skills and your research experience need to be top notch, and you should always try and throw yourself in that research whenever you can. And being a student ambassador does actually offer some paid research experience opportunities. For example, one of those at my university is that you can be an evaluation ambassador and data input ambassador, which is really useful because it gives you experience of manually typing in data, which, as much as you might not like that idea, quite an important role when it comes to being a psychology researcher. Also, my outreach, the apartment at my university, is doing a massive research project on reading interventions and their impact on disadvantaged children. So, if I really wanted to get involved in this research project, I could quite easily email them and say, "Hello, I really want to be a part of this research project. Can I be a part of the data analysis and the write-up team?" And they might say no, but they might say yes. So that might be a really good chance to be able to get involved in education research, and most importantly, this is an intervention designed for young people. And whilst this is not a psychological intervention, an intervention is an intervention. So you might be able to talk about it in future work experience and future job applications. All experience is good experience at the end of the day. So that's something else that you might want to think about when it comes to being a student ambassador. You get to work in education. So this was actually one of the most surprising benefits that I didn't think about until this year. This year though, because I do not want to be a teacher. I do not want to be a teaching assistant. To be honest, for my long-term career, I'm not sure I want to work in education per se, but the brilliant thing about outreach work and being a student ambassador is that you do get to work in education in a very unique way because you're only seeing the students for like one session at a time. You get to travel all over Medway and Kent or whatever your local area is. And the brilliant thing about this is that because you work in education, it opens up a lot of psychology job opportunities. So beforehand, and I could only apply for the clinical psychology job roles that were not related to schools or education in any way, shape, or form. But because I've been a student ambassador for 6 years, meaning that I've worked in education for 6 years, means that I can apply for education roles. For example, because of my experience, I've been able to apply for an assistant educational psychologist, a trainee education mental health practitioner, and in the future, I can continue to apply for those in schools and other education-based roles, which is going to be super useful. Also, as part of the research assistant job roles that I've applied for, some of them want experience in schools. So that's really good because I've actually got that experience. So I've been able to talk about that in my applications. So I guess what I'm trying to say, as we get towards the end of this podcast episode, is being a student ambassador, working in outreach and widening participation, really does open so many doors to you, more than you might ever think is actually possible. Lead ambassador, leadership, organization, and time management. So, one of my favorite roles in outreach is I absolutely love being a lead ambassador. To some extent, I'm better suited to being a lead ambassador than a supporting ambassador. One, because I love the money. I think the money's amazing. But also, I love organization, time management, like managing people, managing sessions. And I love the organization side of it because when you're a lead ambassador, you're the link up between your supporting ambassadors and the outreach member of like staff. You need to manage the day, you need to manage timings, sessions, you need to address their problems. And to be honest, that is what I love. I flat out love the time management aspect and the organization aspect and just project management. Like, I could be an amazing manager in the future. That's what I love. It's what I thrive off. Put me in a situation where I've got to manage something, I am in my element. And it's amazing fun. And there are lots of different examples that I could give you about being a leader and ambassador and solving problems. But I'm going to try and keep it relatively short. For example, when I was lead and ambassador for the conservation week, the other week, the first day, which was the only day that I was lead ambassador for, was I had to manage a situation because we were in a really narrow corridor. All of the rooms were in the same corridor. So when we transferred and when we swapped students between sessions, it was going to be quite a nightmare, and there was going to be a lot of chaos. So I managed it by moving certain rooms first. Well, first they were making certain groups stand in certain areas, etc. So it ran really smoothly. And then because I'm such a versatile and adaptable ambassador, I was able to observe sessions just so I could be an outreach tutor the next day. So unless you were there, I might not be able to fully understand it or explain it. But these skills of leadership, organization, project management, and time management are super useful to aspiring psychologists because you need to show a leadership both in terms of yourself, your clients, and maybe your team at times. Because if your mental health service is experiencing a difficulty, then you might need to step up, take leadership of the situation, and try and help the service solve this problem. Also, organisation. When you're a mental health worker, or whenever you work in any mental health role, you're going to need to organise your caseload, your clients, your time, and that's where time management comes in, though, because you need to manage your time up between your clients, your paperwork, planning sessions, and everything else that someone in a mental health role has to do. And it is difficult enough without poor time management skills. So it's just something to think about for the future. Outreach tutor. Presenting, teaching, communication. So to be honest, if you had asked me even 2 months ago whether I would enjoy being an outreach tutor, I would have said begrudgingly, perhaps, but it was not my favourite thing. It really was not my favourite thing to stand in front of a class, presenting a session, talking and making it come alive. But that was not my thing. Because I would stutter, I would be nervous, and I was always a little anxious about what if a kid makes fun of my stuttering? What if I don't do well? What if outreach thinks that I'm a really bad presenter and then they don't want me to present anymore? And so many other questions like that. These are all very normal experiences, and I remember sometimes I would just get really nervous before presenting. But after I got the lesson plan, after I looked through the slides, I would be a lot more relaxed and I would just really enjoy it. And because I've been doing so much outreach tutoring over the past few weeks, I really enjoy it. It's amazing. It's just so much fun to present sessions. Make it come alive. Just add your little details about your personal life, about your degree, what you think about this session. For example, one of my favourite ones, or one of the ones I always remember, and this connects to the great thing about meeting new people and making new friends. Because as you meet new people and you make new friends, you learn stuff about them. You learn about their past, their degree, how they're finding stuff, and other little tablets of information which you can add to your presentation. For example, I always remember during the Year 8 Housing Challenge. This is when Year 8 students, so 12 and 13-year olds, they come out to the university, and what happens is that they design some brand new university accommodation for university students. It's an amazing day. I had a treehouse student village as one of my groups. That was amazing, and I flat out loved the ideas behind that group. It was just amazing fun. But there's a research session during that, and I was talking about students prefer self-catered accommodation compared to a catered accommodation. And just to bring that section alive, I actually counted that point slightly, because the whole point of like that day is that they need to think about the student group that they're designing it for. So what I mentioned was that sometimes catered accommodation is brilliant, especially if you've got chronic illness or other needs, which makes cooking and managing food very difficult for you. For example, like my ex has chronic illness, they're bedbound, and they have chronic pain though. So sometimes they just can't cook, and them needing to go to the shops, plan their meals, cook their meals, etc., etc., can be a major stressor. But because they have catered accommodation, that's one less stressor that they have to think about. So it's just using those small habits and those small life experiences which can help you to bring your session and your content alive. And now, sure, I stutter from time to time, but that's just me. But I love my job. I love outreach tutoring, and I make it quite performative. Well, I mean, and I don't mean like dancing jazz hands and everything. I mean it that I make it interesting, and that's why I can find presenting a little bit draining because for me it is like quite performative because I want it to be in like engaging. I want to be more extroverted, so that's why I need to like manage my energy levels more carefully. But it's flat out brilliant, and I love it. So the reason why I want to like talk about this as an aspiring clinical psychologist is because on like job applications and person specifications, I constantly see that in employers that want you to be good at communicating, good at presenting, good at writing about research ideas and communicating them to the public, policymakers, and your intended audience, which might not be other psychology people. And this is what being an outreach tutor is really good for. Because you work with so many different age groups and so many different sessions, it really does make you think about, right, how do I need to present a session to 17 and 18-year olds differently compared to how I would present a like session to 12 and a 13-year-old. Because yeah, technically there's only 3 years between them, but in reality it's a lot more because of the development going on and where they are in their education journey. So some of them will be thinking about university. A lot of the 12 and 13-year-olds will not. Most of them will have no idea what university is. So it's about changing your vocabulary, changing your knowledge, and just changing how you present in information. Also, a really good experience that I had recently as an outreach tutor was that there was a visually impaired girl who I was working with, so I needed to adapt my session and I needed to adapt my presenting style to suit her needs. So normally when my students like on a task, I play some background and music. I play some Demon Slayer lo-fi, more for me than for them, but having some background music helps them to focus, and it's something that a lot of us average students have found as really critical to think about. So overall, as a student ambassador, being an outreach tutor is a really important and really helpful because it gives you a lot of key skills that future employers are really crazy for. Makes you aware of inequality and barriers to education. This is the penultimate point. And one reason why I love being an outreach ambassador is that I get to work with students from different backgrounds, different types of disadvantage, and different types of barriers impact them in their life and their education. And that's very eye opening because I come from a lower middle class family in a very poor area. So, yes, I am aware of quite a lot of barriers already, but there are other barriers I'm not. There's some barriers I'm completely invisible to because they don't impact me, like racism, certain forms like the discrimination, also caring responsibilities, having parents with mental health difficulties, etc., and also a whole bunch of other barriers which I can't talk about publicly on the podcast. So there are lots of different barriers to education and in their daily lives, which continues the cycle of poverty. And some of it is just heartbreaking. But that's why being a student ambassador is important. It's valuable. And that's why this is why I'm so sad, to be honest. I'm going to be leaving this work in a few months' time because I won't be able to help these students anymore. I won't be able to aspire, educate these students in the same way. So I do want to do it in a different way, yeah, but because I'm now aware of the stark inequalities and the barriers that people face at no fault of their own, it makes me feel grateful for what I have. It makes me feel really privileged at times, but also it makes me want to help people. It makes me more compassionate, more knowledgeable, just so I'm able to challenge people, and I'm able to challenge society when a society turns about and says, "Oh, if you're poor, then it's your fault. Being poor is a choice." That's absolutely rubbish. And I hate it when people say that with an utter passion. But being a student ambassador helps us to give you the experiences, the knowledge to be able to counter that, to counter those silly ideas. Money. I couldn't really do a psychology podcast episode and talking about working as a student ambassador without talking about money. This has been a major benefit of me being a student ambassador for the last few years, especially during the final year of my part-time masters, when I've had rent to pay, when I found out that my university was charging me £2,000 extra because they charged me full-time rate for my first term before I switched part-time. Then it's only then that they were charging me part-time rates, which was a major issue for me because it meant that I'm £2,000 worse off. But so without my outreach work and without doing lots of it, and outreach having really, really good pay, like shockingly good pay that actually makes my mum quite jealous, I would not be able to afford my rent, my food, do my car, to live a little. I do not spend a lot of money, but outreach work has been a lifeline for me. And a part of me does, I think, that if I didn't have my outreach money, or to be honest, if I didn't have my outreach job, I would be a lot worse off. I would be very nervous about my financial situation because postgraduate loans in the UK are horrific. They're really bad. They are not ideal in the slightest. And yeah, I do not want to think about how stressed I've been over the past year about money issues and me just not having enough money to live, pay my bills, and eat. So that's been something that I've had to think about quite a lot about. But it's one of the reasons why I've been so grateful for outreach because I've been able to work a lot, I've been able to apply for a lot of work opportunities, and because I've networked and because so many members of staff know that I'm good, I'm able to get a lot of hours. Plus, I also drive, which is really beneficial in that terms of getting work. So it's just good to think about. So if you're concerned about money, definitely look at being a student ambassador because in my experience, it can be really well paid. Conclusion. To wrap up this psychology podcast episode, and because this is a definitely longer one than a normal, just want to quickly run through the benefits again of being a student ambassador and undertaking outreach and widening participation work. Communication, teamwork, friendliness, rapport. You get to have fun and you get to do a lot of different things that you wouldn't be able to do as a psychology student. Gives you work experience, meet new people, make new friends. Money, get involved in research and data input. Work with a wide range of populations, like working age adults, children and young people, adolescents, people with learning difficulties, and asylum seekers. Interact with people from different cultures. Lead ambassador, leadership, organisation, and time management. Get to work in education, outreach tutor, presenting, teaching, communication. Makes you more aware of inequalities and barriers to education. And my final note that I would just say is being a student ambassador, working with amazing other ambassadors, working with wonderful outreach members of staff has been an amazing privilege over the past few years. I've loved it. I've just loved interacting with everyone. And I'm so passionate about this work because I get to do stuff I never would have done before. I've grown so much as a person over the past few years, and I love it. I really want every single student to do it because it really does make you grow. It makes you have so many transferable skills, and it helps you so much for the future. Of course, this is just my egg experience, and other people might have better or worse egg experiences than me, depending on your university and who you are as a person. But try it, have fun, and just think about it. You might change so many lives, and you might have more of an impact on these young people than you ever thought possible. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I know that I did, because it was just so much fun to think about how much I've benefited from outreach work. And to be honest, I've been so busy this week, I've just not had time to write another podcast or write a blog post. And if you want to learn more, please check out Careers in Psychology, a guide to careers in clinical psychology, forensic psychology, and business psychology. Available in all the usual places. You can get the AI-generated audiobook from selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Kobo, Google Play, and others. And if you want to support the podcast on a monthly basis and get access to tons of great rewards, now you can. Patreon.com/The Psychology World Podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a monthly basis, then now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Con So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwiley.net. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.